Your inner child is exactly what it sounds like. It's the child that continues to live within you, whether you're conscious of it or not, and that can continue to direct certain behaviors in certain directions and certain habits within your life, whether you're conscious of it or not. And the inner child is very important for two main reasons. The first reason is that if your inner child, okay, and we're going back to our childhood now, we're going to take a step into history. If your inner child experienced traumatic events ranging from neglect to abuse to abandonment to simply having your important, very important, crucial emotional needs consistently go unmet, even though you believed your childhood to be quite a normal childhood, what can happen is as you get older, that inner child that went through those experiences may never have processed those experiences. And so that wounded inner child continues to live within you and continuing to act in some of the same ways that they did back then to cope with those experiences. What do I mean by this? When I was a child and I went through my own emotional needs not being met, much love to my parents, they were doing their best. What I would do is I would leave my body feeling the pain of not being recognized or not being seen, or what I felt at the time was being abandoned in some ways. Instead of feeling it in my body, I would escape into my head. And so I would just live from the neck up, dissociated, right? And because of that, throughout much of my adult life, you may find that this is relatable for yourself as well, is I've just lived in the head with so much of what I do within my life. And very infrequently have I been living in the body. And what happens when we just live in the head instead of living in the body is we're constantly thinking and living in the future or living in the past and getting lost in our thoughts because the mind has only one thing that it can do, and that is time travel and think, right? Which is a beautiful blessing when used in the right ways. But what I was missing because of these experiences is because of this coping mechanism, I wasn't getting the blessing of living grounded in myself, feeling connected to myself and in the present moment. And so as a result, I experienced a lot more anxiety, a lot more obsessive thinking, a lot more overthinking in general, right? Now, the flip side of this, the other part of the inner child, is that when our inner child is given the opportunity to process these things, when our inner child is given the opportunity to, yes, recognize that these experiences happened, and then gets to process them, let them out, whether that be in the form of therapy, that be in the form of art, that be in the form of having an authority figure who created a safe environment for these things to be let go of, well, then that inner child, instead of giving us these coping mechanisms or these habits that aren't serving us in the ways we want them to, instead, the child also knows incredible creativity. The inner child also knows incredible playfulness, maybe adventurousness, maybe a loving connection and loving way of just walking about the world. Think about children. They go out there just ready to take on the world, not concerned about what might happen, right? When we get to process so much of those things that we experienced, the traumas small and big, and I put air quotes on them because it's all relative to you, right? When we get to process these things, we get to release so much of what has been sitting so heavy on our shoulders, and we get to experience more of that joy. We get to experience more of that grace and that playfulness coming out naturally as a result of letting so much of these things go. And so, recognizing this, understanding that this inner child is at play within us, whether we are aware of it or not, allows us a whole new perspective on what is happening inside of us, number one, and number two, what we can do with it. And so the name of the game, as I talk about in so many of my videos here, is number one, becoming aware of some of these patterns that are playing out in us. For me, I recognized I was only living in my head. And number two, beginning the process of processing them, whether one-on-one with a coach or a therapist. Number two, just getting to understand them more and listen to them in a safe space within ourselves, so on and so forth. And you could look at those tools throughout my YouTube channel. But this video, I just want to share what the inner child is and how it can be impacting us. And the inner child, in doing this work, has a real impact on how our nervous system is operating, right? When we start to process these things, our nervous system runs more efficiently. There's less to hold on to. There's less to process. But when we're holding on to these things, our nervous system has to work at double the capacity, right? Double the energy output to take care of everything that's holding on to. But we don't want that. We want to live more relaxed and at ease and connected and in that social mode of playfulness and adventureness and creativity, intuition, right? So, before we wrap up today's video, I just have one question for you, maybe two. Maybe I'll have two questions. The first question is, where do you feel your inner child is showing up within you, whether in a healthy way or an unhealthy way, in a way that's you are finding to be empowering you in the ways that you want, or maybe disempowering you in the ways that you don't want? And number two, what's one way you can continue to nourish your relationship with your inner child and give your inner child that space to get what it needs? And I'll leave you there. I'll leave you right there. Again, if you want more tips and practices and tools, I invite you to come into my YouTube channel where you can see more of the actual practices, the tools, and so on and so forth. And if you have any questions related to events or courses or anything else, down below, you can check out all the links for that. In the meantime, let's let our inner child run free. Because that sounds like a very fun world. Of course, with the loving discipline of the healthy parent too, we can't just have total chaos. But you get what I mean.